Being awake at night and napping during the day is not for everyone. This wasn't an issue for me as a child because I couldn't fall asleep at night and ended up sleeping in class. I lost track of how many times I awoke to my instructor calling out my name and my students gazing at me. When I turned 16, I had to choose what job I wanted to pursue. Because I am generally up at night, I considered becoming a security guard who works the night shift. I appear frightening since I am tall and frequently go to the gym. So my looks alone would warn others not to mess with me, despite the fact that I am not as tough and powerful as I appear. That being said, it looks that my knowledge in the sector has led me to a quite unique work opportunity. My employer contacted me and asked if I would be interested in guarding a hospital for a few days. He claimed that the position would pay significantly more than my prior employment because it required expertise and a trustworthy individual. During my stay here, I had not yet been given the opportunity to work at a hospital, which appeared to be a daunting task. If I performed the work satisfactorily, I may be eligible for a raise. I gladly accepted the offer, because refusing would be silly. I recall my supervisor looked relieved when he heard my response. He reportedly struggled to locate additional security officers ready to do the position. You'll start next week on Thursday. Make sure you arrive before 10 p.m., he remarked, shaking my hand. I shook his hand with a big smile on my face, excited to get started. You bet, sir. In the days preceding up to the job, I worked a few routine shifts at various locations, including a university and a McDonald's. I was relieved, however, when the day of the rare opportunity arrived. Not wanting to be late, I arrived at the hospital about 8 p.m. It's only a 30-minute journey, but you never know what may happen. I also decided that getting to know the location wasn't such a horrible idea. How am I meant to defend a building whose layout I am unfamiliar with? I didn't want to screw this up because it pays 3 times what I normally make. It was unusually crowded on the road, so I arrived at the hospital at 8:40 p.m. I got out of my car and approached the front door. The structure appeared medieval, as it was formed of bricks and had a Romanesque beauty. The structure wasn't large. In fact, it was very little. From the exterior, it appeared that the building had 3 stories and narrow halls. I pulled open the front door and welcomed a lady at the reception counter. Her grin exuded a warm, relaxing vibe that instantly calmed my anxiety. Hello? I believe I was hired for the night shift at this hospital. I'm a bit early, though. I was supposed to start at 10 p.m. What's your name, darling? She said, retaining her welcoming grin. I'm William, I said boldly. She began typing on the PC in front of her, as if to confirm whether I was telling the truth. I mean, you can never be too certain. Some eccentric persons may claim to be a night shift security guard. Is your boss Robert? Yes, ma'am. All right. One of the other security guards will be here shortly to explain the procedures. Would you like a cup of coffee in the meantime? I'd like a cup of coffee. Could it be black? I said, thankful. She giggled and went to fetch me some coffee. She reappeared a few minutes later, holding a cup of coffee. It tasted wonderful, unlike anything I'd had before. Everything appeared to fall into place when a security guard approached me just as I finished my coffee. The security guard stared at me with suspicion, appraising my looks before stating, "You must be the security guard, huh?" I didn't expect someone so young to show up for the job, but that doesn't matter if you do as I say. I got out of my chair and extended my hand to shake his. Nice to meet you, sir. I assume you will be showing me around? I inquired confidently. I was always taught that it's necessary to appear confident, even if you don't feel confident, since it makes a good impression on those you work for. However, the security guy in front of me, 6 feet 7 inches and quite the physique, made it tough not to be scared. Follow me, he instructed. I followed him, and we went to the security department, where he showed me how the cameras worked and gave me a tour of the facility. He also taught me some basic security principles, which I'd heard too many times. Oh, there's one final thing, he said as he walked away. You see that document on the desk? Read it. It includes a set of regulations that you must observe. If you don't, we will know. I hope you are professional enough to take them seriously and follow them, no matter how unusual they appear. I glanced at him, stunned, but quickly recovered my calm and promised him that I would obey the regulations. "Good luck, kid," he replied, exiting the room. I watched him leave as the clock above the door told me it was 9:30 p.m., which meant I had 30 more minutes before my shift officially began. The paper stated 7 rules, the first of which was that your shift would begin at 10 p.m. and you must be inside the security room by then. From 10:15 p.m. until 11 p.m., you must patrol the building to ensure that no one is present. If you see someone, please ask them to leave. Rule 2. Between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., a young woman may come at the front door, knocking and begging to see her husband. Ignore her and pretend she isn't there until she leaves. Rule 3. Make sure the lights in the intensive care unit stay on throughout your shift. If they go out, go over there and turn them back on. If you hear screaming while the lights are off, run to the nearest bathroom and stay there until the screaming stops, then turn the lights back on. Rule 4. If there's a small girl with a teddy bear in the cafeteria, sit next to her and don't say anything. If she looks at you, walk back to the security room. If she talks to you, respond until she departs. Rule 5. Around 1 a.m., go to the general ward and check on the patients. If one appears to be sitting on their bed, ask if they're okay and do anything they ask. If they begin up a discussion other than this, ignore it. Rule 6. If it begins to rain, open the front door and let people in for cover. Make sure everyone you let inside exits the premises. If someone appears to be missing, you will notice them on the security cameras. Do not stare at them. Rule 7. If the security cameras switch off throughout the night, hide and pray for your life. They will not discover you. I put the paper back on the desk and sat back in my chair, laughing at the absurdity of the scenario. I must be getting pranked, I thought to myself, though deep down, I didn't believe it was a prank. This was, after all, a hospital, and it seemed unlikely my boss would go to such lengths for a joke. Perhaps this was his way of seeing how much he could trust me, to see if I would follow such foolish rules. I reviewed the guidelines to ensure that I understood them, and I was determined to show my employer that he could rely on me. The clock struck 10 p.m., and I turned my attention to the security cameras. With not much happening on the monitors, and only 15 minutes until I was supposed to patrol, I felt my attention gradually falling toward my phone. Looking at memes and stupid internet news is the best way to waste time, and it sure does make the time go by quickly. It felt like I barely spent any time on my phone, yet it was already 10:15 p.m. I left my cozy chair, stretched my legs, and made my way out of the security room, figuring that starting at the highest floor and descending my way down would be the best course of action. Fortunately, there was an elevator, so I didn't have to use the stairs. I made my way to the top level and began inspecting all of the rooms, hallways, and even the restrooms. As predicted, nothing unusual occurred. Working the night shift as a security guard requires someone to be there at the place in case something happens, but this does not guarantee that anything will happen, making it a monotonous yet simple method to earn money. Additionally, I could get coffee and food anytime I wanted. No one appeared to be on the 3rd story, so I proceeded to the 2nd floor. After patrolling it, I reached the same conclusion I determined beforehand. Nothing exceptional. I checked my phone to see whether I needed to hurry. It was 10:32 p.m., leaving me plenty of time to examine the 1st floor. It did strike me as unusual, however, that there was practically no one in the hospital. I expected a hospital to always have physicians and patients in the facility. That is the entire idea of a hospital, but every room I examined was empty. Despite the fact that my boss did not go all in on the preparations, I proceeded to the 1st floor, which contained the intensive care unit, security room, front door, and cafeteria. I planned to pass through the ICU and main hall area first, followed by the cafeteria for a snack. As I made my way into the ICU, I was surprised to see an old guy, perhaps 70 years old, standing in one of the rooms. Stunned for a moment, I remembered Rule 1. If you encounter anyone, please ask them to leave. Suddenly, everything fell into place, and I understood that my employer had most likely hired an actor and allowed him inside the premises to test my adherence to the regulations. I sighed and approached the man. "Excuse me, sir. You are not supposed to be here at this time. I would like to kindly ask you to leave. I told you." The old guy gazed at me silently, perplexed by what I'd told him. "Sir, I would kindly like to ask you to leave. I told you." He nodded in agreement before following me out of the building. "Have a good night, sir," I said as he left. The old guy surprisingly whispered just before vanishing into the darkness, "Be careful of the surgeon." What did he mean by that? I instantly recognized my employer had directed him to say that to terrify me, so I dismissed it. At 10:53 p.m., I returned to the security room, leaned back in my chair, and confidently played some games on my phone. I continued my patrol around the floor, and since no one else appeared to be on the first floor, I grabbed another cup of coffee and a croissant from the cafeteria. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed the ICU lights were turned off. I had nothing to be concerned about because there was no one in the building. I had spent over an hour playing games on my phone before checking the time, which was nearly 12 a.m. I cursed myself for not paying attention, as I had no idea how long the lights had been off. I got out of the security room to turn on the lights, and as I walked towards the ICU, I froze in my steps. The sound of people screaming was deafening, and I was baffled by the situation, unsure if my boss would have gone this far just to see how far I would follow the rules. The agony and screams were noticeable and raised my anxiety, and when I heard a door open and close, followed by footsteps making their way toward my location, I bolted to the bathroom on the first floor and locked myself in one of the toilets. I couldn't seem to understand how anyone could even be in the building, and the screams of agony felt so real. Earlier, I could fully regain my calm. The bathroom door swung open, and the same footsteps I had heard earlier went inside. I attempted to remain as still as possible, not knowing whether the person had a weapon. The silence was deafening for a second, until the guy began murmuring a song to himself. "Welcome to the hospital. You can arrive but not leave. Welcome to the hospital," he whispered as he banged on the doors of each restroom stall. I started when he pounded on mine, the sound substantially louder than the others. Through the space beneath the door, I could see his feet on the other side, immobile. "Is there anyone there? Open up," he murmured with a crazy tone. "Don't be shy," he added. My heart hammered in my chest as I hung on to the quiet. I stayed immobile, praying he would soon leave me alone so I could get the hell out of there. The man continued, pounding on the door as if to elicit a reaction from me. "Come on, William. I need your help with something," he exclaimed anxiously. After a few minutes, he gave trying and went out of the restroom, but not before uttering one more statement, which made my blood run cold. I couldn't figure out how he knew my name. "See you soon, William." I didn't leave the bathroom for another 10 minutes until the screaming stopped. I unlocked the bathroom stall I was in and slowly opened the door that led to the main hall, making sure no one was in sight. I exited the bathroom and slowly made my way to the ICU to turn the lights back on. As soon as I turned the lights back on, I dashed to the security room, which suddenly felt like the only safe place in the building. As I sank into the comfy chair, I glanced at the time on my phone, which read 12:51 a.m., still full of adrenaline from what had just happened. I quickly reread all the rules to see if I had acted the way I was supposed to, and thankfully, that was the case. As I got to Rule 5, I was given a lovely reminder to check in on the patients around 1 a.m. and fulfill any wishes they had. Though I wasn't sure if I was ready for another adventure, I was. During my patrol, I didn't see anybody in the patient rooms, so how could there be anyone? I made my way up the stairs this time, unwilling to use the elevator since I was afraid it might stop working, and it was just one floor, so I may as well take the stairs. As I stepped onto the second floor, my heart rate began to rise slightly because I had no idea what to expect. As I made my way to the patients, I began to hear a lot of coughing from one of the rooms, so I decided to go through the rooms one by one to make sure I didn't miss any of them. When I looked into the first room, expecting to see nothing but an empty room, I was disappointed. As I made my way through the corridor, the sound of coughing became more audible, and I realized how much I despised the sight of people in these conditions. An elderly woman was sleeping on the bed, with 2 tubes in her nostrils and a needle in her arm. Of course, it was in the last room, so I'd have to run the furthest if it was that maniac from the bathroom before. All the other patients were sleeping, so I took a deep breath and stepped into the doorway, despite my nervousness. The man was sitting on the bed, elbow in front of his mouth, coughing as he had been for the past few minutes, and when he noticed me, he tried to speak, uttering with terror, trying to stop his coughing for a second. I was taken aback. This guy appeared to be an actual patient, and I even felt sorry for him. I couldn't imagine what it would be like for him. I dashed down to the cafeteria to grab a cup of water and bring it to him. When he saw me standing in the doorway, his hand signaled me to come closer and hand him the cup of water. I walked toward him and handed it to him. He drank it so quickly that I thought he had broken a world record. He collapsed on his bed and thankfully stopped coughing. "Thank you," he exclaimed. "Not a problem, dude. You seem to need it," I responded. After a minute of sitting in quiet with the man, I decided it was time for me to leave the room because I had done what he asked, and he didn't seem to be much of a talker. He was simply delighted to have his water. As I approached the door and reached for the doorknob, he spoke. "Where are you going?" "Come sit with me, my friend." His tone changed from earlier, and he seemed serious. I gently turned my head back to him, recognizing I had no option but to do as he requested, and sat down next to him on the bed. "What's up?" I attempted to express it confidently, but failed. "I won't injure you, son. I appreciate your help. You see, the surgeon forced a can of cinnamon down my throat, leaving me unable to breathe. I wanted to warn you to be cautious, since he is still walking the building. He put cinnamon down your throat." I inquired in disbelief. That's when I recalled what the elderly guy had warned before. Be cautious of the surgeon. "Yes," he did. "I wanted to warn you. This appears to be your first time here. I felt you want to know there's a madman inside the building. If you follow the rules, kid, you'll be fine." After taking a deep breath and standing up, I thanked him and made my way out of the room. Fortunately, he did not ask me to return, and I made my way to the security room. My pace increased when I heard something falling on the 3rd floor. In no multiverse would I have gone upstairs to see what was going on there. If I had followed the rules, I would be fine. I grabbed the door handle of the security room and closed it as soon as I was inside. A wave of relief crashed over me as I once again felt safe. I sat down in the chair and once again read the sheet of paper. Thankfully, there were no more rules stating that I had to go outside the security room. I prayed to God that the rest of the night would be as boring as all of my previous jobs had been. I was relieved that my shift ended at 6 a.m., which meant I only had 4 hours left to go. I could tell the events of the night had taken a toll on my energy, as I felt quite exhausted. While staring at the security cameras, I felt my eyelids slowly closing and my mind drifting away, and I fell asleep in the chair, completely forgetting where I was in the first place. I awoke around 2:45 a.m. and gave my body and mind some time to adjust to reality, as I had no idea where I was when I woke up. After a short while, I came back to my senses when I realized I was in the middle of a night shift. Awake, though still feeling the effects of waking up, I made my way to the cafeteria to grab myself a cup of coffee, figuring it would help me stay awake for the rest of the night. I walked into the empty cafeteria and made my way to the coffee machine, where I watched the coffee pour into my cup and was entertained by the sight of it. As I turned around to go back to the security room, I jumped and spilled the coffee all over my suit. Although no one was in the cafeteria when I walked in, there was now a little girl sitting at one of the tables. My train of thought was interrupted when I noticed the little girl had turned around and was now staring at me. She had a small white skirt, a pink t-shirt, and blonde curly hair that went just as far as her shoulders. In her hand, she held a teddy bear with buttons as eyes, except one of the eyes was hanging on by a thread. I wasn't sure what the rules were about this occurrence, so I did my best to remember them. In the end, it was only a little girl, so I felt compelled to sit next to her, even though I was hesitant and unsure of what I was supposed to do based on the rules. I sat next to her, her eyes intently staring at mine. She did not say a word for a long time, and I felt extremely uncomfortable, unsure when I could leave. That is when she started giggling, covering her mouth with one hand while still holding her teddy bear with the other, and saying in a frightening and teasing tone, "You forgot the rules." I looked at her, confused, thinking I had remembered them correctly. She could see the panic look in my eyes. "Enjoying this, I'll count to 60, and then we'll look for you," she excitedly asked. I didn't bother to ask who we was. She looked at me like a kid looks at candy in a candy store. I ran to the security room, leaving my coffee next to the little girl. As I ran away, I could hear her counting, 1, 2, 3, forever with me. I locked myself in the security room and quickly grabbed the rules. As I reread Rule 4, if there's a little girl with a teddy bear in the cafeteria, sit next to her and don't say a word. If she looks at you, walk back to the security room. If she speaks to you, talk back until she leaves. My throat turned dry as I realized my mistake. I had broken one of the rules. I remembered her mentioning hide and seek, and that's when all the security cameras turned off. 52, 53, 54, 55. "Prepare to run for your life," the little girl sang from inside the cafeteria. I completely lost it because I had no idea what to expect or where to hide. The security room was too obvious for me to stay in, as there was no way I could escape from here. I reached for the front door and frantically tried to open it, but it didn't budge no matter how hard I kicked. By the time I entered the room, I could already hear the little girl frantically laughing and singing as she counted to 60. Unsure of how long I had left before she arrived, I decided I had to hide as soon as possible. I looked around the room for any suitable hiding spots, but there seemed to be none. The best option I seemed to have was to get inside the ceiling, which was made of plates that could be pushed up. I stood on the bed to get. I could tell the ceiling wasn't meant for anyone to be on top of it because every little move I made caused the ceiling to cave. Once I made it above the ceiling, I blocked off the square hole and lay completely still, not wanting to make a sound or risk the ceiling falling. I could hear the little girl enter the room, tiptoeing around excitedly. "I know you are in here. I heard you drop something," she said in a playful tone, enjoying every second of it. My heartbeat skyrocketed throughout the situation, unsure whether she would find me or not. She poked into the ceiling with a broom, trying to figure out if I was there or not. I almost jumped when I felt the vibrations of the broom touching the ceiling, but I managed to lay still and not make a sound. "I guess you're not here then," she said disappointedly as she walked out of the room and continued searching. I could feel the ceiling giving in to my weight, which meant I had to find a different hiding spot. After a couple of minutes, and making sure she was no longer nearby, I slowly descended back into the room, being as quiet as I could. I peered into the hallway to see if anyone was there, but there was no one in sight. I made my way through the hallway with I figured I should hide on the first floor, because she had already checked the entire floor, though I didn't know exactly where she was. I slowly made my way downstairs, making sure no one was there as I heard her shoes touching the floor above me. I knew I was safe to walk on the first floor for a while, but when I turned the corner, I saw the silhouette of a man standing. "What is a patient of mine doing outside of his room this late?" the man inquired. Recognizing that I didn't have much time before he arrived, I had two options: go back upstairs and hope I didn't run into the girl, possibly finding a hiding spot there, or run to the bathroom once more and hope I'd be safe there. I didn't like either of those options because I felt they would lead to me being caught. Despite the fact that I didn't have time to go back upstairs, I quickly ran to the bathroom. "Come on now. I need to inspect your organ," the guy exclaimed as I heard him unlock the bathroom door. His voice seemed familiar, but I couldn't figure out why until he completed exploring the bathroom. You were wise enough to shelter somewhere this time. I am amazed. You are not as stupid as you look, he continued, and I recognized who he was. The guy sounded precisely like the lunatic I had met previously, and my blood chilled at the realization that he had known where I was all along. He opened the janitor closet and looked about for a while, but concluded it was too small for someone to hide in, so he quickly closed it, leaving me in full darkness. Terrified to do anything, I waited in there for the rest of the night, not leaving until I was certain it was entirely secure. I could hear a drill, then a man screaming in agony, and then a man who I assumed was the surgeon laughing maniacally. I grabbed my phone to see how long I had until the nightmare was over. 5:45 a.m., only 15 minutes until the hospital staff arrived for their daily shift. I just had to hold on a little longer. I fell asleep in the closet, fatigued from the night I had observed, feeling absolutely lost and defeated. A gentle elderly guy, who appeared to be the janitor, woke me up and looked shocked to discover a security guard lurking behind his equipment. "Was it a rough night?" he inquired, assuming he knew the answer based on my look. "It is over," he said. "You can come out now." I got back on my feet and walked out into the hallway. The hospital looked entirely different during the day than it did at night, and instead of being scary, it appeared to be a pleasant place. I thanked the janitor for his compassion and got the heck out of there. I drove home and collapsed on my bed, still unable to comprehend what I had witnessed. I told my boss I was sick and did not answer his phone calls. After a week, I returned to my regular uneventful shifts, and while the boredom was terrible, I did not mind it at all. In the end, anything is preferable to spending the night in that hospital.